Uncover Poirot's Secrets, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot reveals thrilling mysteries.
In the grand yet foreboding Blackthorn Manor, nestled in the Devon countryside, a celebratory weekend for Sir Reginald Ashbourne's 60th birthday turns deadly. The retired diplomat, known for his wealth and influence, is found murdered in his study at 2:17 a.m., a carved ivory letter opener piercing his heart. A scrawled note, "The truth will out," lies beside him, hinting at a secret he was poised to reveal. The closed circle of guests, Lady Evelyn, his reserved wife, Julian, his resentful son, Clara Denham, his efficient secretary, Dr. Lionel Warwick, his trusted friend, Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a nervous cousin, and Victor Crane, a calculating financier, becomes a web of suspects, each harboring motives and secrets. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Blackthorn Manor. The late summer sun cast a golden glow over Blackthorn Manor, a sprawling Georgian estate nestled in the heart of the Devon countryside. Its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys stood as a testament to its grandeur, yet an air of quiet unease hung over the meticulously manicured lawns. The manor belonged to Sir Reginald Ashbourne, a retired diplomat whose wealth and influence had long been the envy of his peers. This weekend, the house was alive with the hum of a carefully curated gathering, a celebration, or so it was proclaimed, of Sir Reginald's 60th birthday. But to those who knew the man, it was clear that Sir Reginald never did anything without purpose, and the invitation to this particular weekend carried an undercurrent of something unspoken. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend and chronicler of Hercule Poirot's exploits, had arrived at Blackthorn Manor that morning, accompanying the great detective at Sir Reginald's personal request. Hastings, with his soldierly bearing and earnest demeanour, felt a flicker of excitement at the prospect of a weekend among England's elite. Yet, as he stepped from the car onto the gravel drive, he could not shake the feeling that the polished civility of the gathering masked something far less pleasant. The guests were an eclectic mix, each a distinct thread in the tapestry of Sir Reginald's life. There was Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, Sir Reginald's elegant but reserved wife, whose cool smile seemed to hide a private sorrow. Their son, Julian Ashbourne, a charming but restless young man of 30, lounged with an air of calculated indifference, his eyes darting to his father with something akin to resentment. Then there was Miss Clara Denham, Sir Reginald's private secretary, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 20s whose efficiency bordered on ruthlessness. Dr. Lionel Warwick, a physician and old friend of Sir Reginald, carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to being trusted. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a widowed cousin of Lady Evelyn, fluttered about with nervous energy, her conversation peppered with vague references to past scandals. Finally, there was Mr. Victor Crane, a financier reputation for ruthless ambition, whose presence at the gathering seemed to puzzle everyone but Sir Reginald himself. The afternoon had been spent in pleasantries, tea on the terrace, a tour of the manor's famed rose gardens, and a lively discussion of politics that Sir Reginald deftly steered away from controversy. Yet as the guests gathered in the drawing-room before dinner, Hastings noticed a tension in the air, like the faint hum of a violin string stretched too taut. Sir Reginald, impeccably dressed in a tailored dinner jacket, stood by the fireplace, his sharp blue eyes surveying his guests with an expression that was both genial and calculating. "My dear friends," Sir Reginald began, his voice smooth and commanding, "I am delighted to have you all here to celebrate this milestone. 60 years is no small thing, and I could not imagine marking it without those closest to me." His gaze lingered briefly on each guest, as though weighing their presence. "Tonight we shall dine, we shall laugh, and we shall make merry. But tomorrow I have an announcement, one that, I assure you, will be of great interest to you all." A murmur rippled through the room. Hastings, standing near the grand piano, caught Poirot's eye. The little Belgian detective, resplendent in a perfectly tailored suit, his mustache waxed to razor-sharp precision, gave a barely perceptible nod. Poirot had been unusually quiet since their arrival, his keen eyes taking in every detail of the manor and its occupants. Hastings knew that silence well. It was the silence of a mind at work, sifting through the nuances of human behavior. Dinner was a lavish affair, served in the oak-paneled dining room under the glow of a crystal chandelier. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, though Hastings noted the undercurrents of strain. Julian Ashbourne drank heavily, his laughter too loud, his remarks edged with sarcasm. Lady Evelyn, seated at the head of the table opposite her husband, picked at her food, her eyes darting to Sir Reginald whenever he spoke. Clara Denham, ever the efficient secretary, seemed to observe the room with a clinical detachment, her pen and notebook never far from hand. Dr. Warwick spoke little, his attention focused on his plate, while Mrs. Langley chattered incessantly about her late husband's investments, casting nervous glances at Victor Crane. Crane himself was a study in composure, his sharp features betraying nothing as he engaged Sir Reginald in a discussion of international trade. As the dessert plates were cleared, Sir Reginald rose once more, tapping his glass with a silver spoon. The room fell silent. "My friends," he said, "I trust you have enjoyed this evening. But before we retire, I must share a small detail about tomorrow's announcement. It concerns a matter of great personal importance, a decision that will affect us all in one way or another." He paused, his smile enigmatic. "Tonight. For tomorrow will be a day of revelations." The guests exchanged glances, some curious, others uneasy. Hastings felt a prickle of anticipation. Poirot, seated beside him, sipped his tisane with an air of serene detachment. But Hastings knew better. The little grey cells were already at work. The evening drew to a close and the guests dispersed to their rooms. Hastings lingered in the drawing room, where Poirot stood by the window gazing out at the moonlit gardens. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" Hastings asked, his voice low. "Sir Reginald's announcement? It's got everyone on edge." Poirot turned, his eyes gleaming in the lamplight. "Mon ami, it is not the announcement itself that intrigues me, but the effect it has already produced. Did you observe the faces at dinner, the tension, the glances, the silences? There is a secret here, Hastings, and it is not one that Sir Reginald alone holds. Tomorrow, I suspect, we shall see the first thread of this mystery unravel." They retired to their rooms, Hastings' mind buzzing with questions. The manor was quiet now, save for the creak of old wood and the distant call of an owl. As he drifted into an uneasy sleep, he could not shake the feeling that Blackthorn Manor was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The scream came at precisely 2:17 a.m., piercing the stillness of the night. Hastings bolted upright, his heart pounding. It was a woman's scream, raw and terrified, echoing from somewhere within the manor. He threw on his dressing gown and hurried into the corridor, where he found Poirot already emerging from his room, his expression calm but alert. "Quickly, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice steady. "That scream came from the east wing." They moved swiftly through the darkened corridors, guided by the flickering light of wall sconces. Other guests appeared, their faces pale and anxious. Lady Evelyn, clutching her shawl, Julian, dishevelled and bleary-eyed, Clara Denham, her composure shaken, and Dr. Warwick, already dressed as though he had not slept. Mrs. Langley stood at the end of the corridor, her hand pressed to her mouth, pointing towards Sir Reginald's study. The door was ajar. Poirot pushed it open, and Hastings followed, his breath catching at the sight within. Sir Reginald Ashbourne lay slumped over his desk, a letter opener buried in his chest. Blood stained the blotter beneath him, and his eyes stared blankly into the void. On the desk, a single sheet of paper bore a scrawled message. "The truth will out." Poirot knelt beside the body, his fingers brushing the edge of the desk. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "The game, it has begun." Hastings stared at the scene, his mind reeling. Sir Reginald, the master of Blackthorn Manor, was dead, murdered. His formidable intellect. The night was far from over, and Blackthorn Manor would never be the same. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Murder. The air in Sir Reginald Ashbourne's study was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the oppressive silence that follows a violent death. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked relentlessly, its pendulum slicing through the seconds with mechanical indifference. It was now 2:30 a.m., and the guests of Blackthorn Manor stood clustered in the doorway, their faces a tableau of shock, fear, and suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating authority, knelt beside the body, his gloved hands moving with delicate precision as he examined the scene. Captain Hastings, standing just behind him, felt his stomach churn at the sight of Sir Reginald's lifeless form, the letter opener protruding grotesquely from his chest. "Mon ami," Poirot said softly, not looking up, "please ensure that no one enters this room. The scene it must remain undisturbed until the police arrive." Hastings nodded, though his eyes lingered on the scrawled note on the desk. "The truth will out." The words seemed to pulse with menace, a cryptic taunt from the killer. He turned to the gathered guests, his voice firm despite the tremor in his chest. "Everyone, please, step back into the corridor. We must wait for the authorities." Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, her face ashen beneath her carefully applied powder, clutched her shawl tightly. "This is monstrous," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Who could do such a thing?" Her eyes darted to her son, Julian, who leaned against the wall, his face pale and his hands trembling as he lit a cigarette. "Steady, mother," Julian muttered, his voice hoarse. No use falling apart now. But his nonchalance was unconvincing, and Hastings noted the way his gaze flickered toward the study, as though drawn to the horror within. Clara Denham, Sir Reginald's secretary, stood apart from the others, her arms crossed tightly. Her sharp features were composed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, or calculation. Dr. Lionel Warwick, ever the professional, stepped forward, his voice calm. "I should examine the body, if I may, to confirm the cause of death." Poirot rose, his movements deliberate. "Non, docteur," he said, his tone polite but firm. "You are a guest here, and a friend of the deceased. It would not be proper. The police surgeon will handle such matters." Warwick hesitated, then nodded, retreating to stand beside Mrs. Beatrice Langley, who was wringing her hands and murmuring prayers under her breath. Victor Crane, the financier, had said little since the discovery. His dark eyes scanned the group, his expression unreadable. "This is a grim business." "Monsieur Crane, you speak of the truth, as if it were a simple thing to uncover. But the truth, it hides in the shadows of human nature, and it requires the little grey cells to bring it to light." The sound of footsteps interrupted them. A housemaid, her face pale and tear-streaked, appeared in the corridor. "I've telephoned the police, sir," she said to Poirot, her voice trembling. "They're sending Inspector Grayson from Exeter. He'll be here within the hour." "Very good," Poirot said, his tone soothing. "And now, mes amis, we shall retire to the drawing-room. There we will wait, and I shall begin to ask my questions." The guests obeyed, their movements sluggish, as though weighed down by the gravity of the moment. Hastings followed Poirot, who paused to cast one final glance at the study. "Observe, Hastings," he murmured. "The letter opener. It is not a common one. Its handle is ivory, carved with a rose. Such a weapon is not chosen by chance." Hastings frowned, his mind racing. "You think the killer meant to send a message?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Everything, mon ami, is a message. The question is, to whom is it addressed?" In the drawing-room, the guests settled uneasily into armchairs and sofas, the fire in the hearth casting flickering shadows across their faces. Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture impeccable despite the hour. Hastings marveled at his friend's composure. While the others seemed shaken, Poirot was a beacon of calm, his mind already weaving a web to trap the truth. "Let us begin," Poirot said, his voice clear and precise. "The police will arrive soon, but time is the enemy of clarity. I, Hercule Poirot, will ask each of you to account for your movements this evening, from the moment we retired after dinner until the scream awakened us." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Lady Evelyn spoke first, her voice steady but strained. "I went to my room at 10 o'clock. I was reading until about midnight, then I fell asleep. I heard nothing until the scream." Poirot nodded, his eyes fixed on her. "And you, Monsieur Julien?" Julien exhaled a cloud of cigarette smoke, his fingers tapping restlessly. "I was in my room too. Had a nightcap. Whiskey, if you must know. I was out cold until the commotion started." Clara Denham's voice was crisp, almost defiant. "I was working in my room, preparing Sir Reginald's correspondence for tomorrow. I heard nothing unusual until Mrs. Langley's scream." Mrs. Langley gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "I was in my room, trying to sleep, but I couldn't settle. I heard a noise. A thud, I think, around 2 o'clock. I thought it was the wind, but I went to check. That's when I saw the light under Sir Reginald's study door and—"
Cream.
Victor Crane leaned forward, his hands steepled. "I was in my room, reviewing some financial documents. I retired at 11 and heard nothing until the scream woke me." Poirot's gaze swept over them, his expression unreadable. "Merci. And now a question. Did any of you speak with Sir Reginald after dinner, or see him leave the drawing room?" Silence greeted his words, but Hastings noticed the subtle shifts in posture. Lady Evelyn's fingers tightening on her shawl, Julian's sudden stillness, Clara's lips pressing into a thin line. Poirot, too, noticed, though he said nothing. The arrival of Inspector Grayson, a burly man with a no-nonsense demeanour, broke the tension. He was accompanied by a constable and a police surgeon, who immediately set to work in the study. Grayson listened as Poirot recounted the discovery, his brow furrowing at the mention of the note. "Sounds like someone had a grudge," he said gruffly. "We'll take statements from everyone, but I'd appreciate your insights, Mr. Poirot. You've a reputation for seeing what others miss." Poirot inclined his head. "I am at your service, Inspector, but I must insist that the study remain undisturbed until I have examined it further. There are details, small perhaps, but significant." Grayson nodded, though his expression suggested he was not entirely pleased to share the investigation. "Very well, let's get to it." As the police began their work, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, did you notice the alibis? All claim to have been in their rooms, yet none can be fully corroborated. And the note, the truth will out. It is too deliberate, too theatrical. The killer wishes us to believe this is a crime of passion, but I suspect a colder mind at work." Hastings frowned. "You think it's one of the guests?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "I think, Hastings, that Blackthorn Manor holds many secrets, and before this night is over, we shall uncover the first of them." As the clock struck 3, the investigation began in earnest, and Hastings knew that Poirot's little grey cells were already piecing together the puzzle of Sir Reginald's murder. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot's Method. The drawing-room of Blackthorn Manor, despite its grandeur, felt stifling as the clock neared 4 a.m. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting a faint glow over the gathered guests, who sat in uneasy silence, their faces etched with fatigue and suspicion. Inspector Grayson had retreated to Sir Reginald's study with his constable, leaving Hercule Poirot to conduct his own preliminary inquiries. Captain Hayes' fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache immaculate despite the hour. His eyes, sharp and piercing, moved from one guest to another, as though reading the secrets hidden in their expressions. "Mes amis," he began, his voice soft, but carrying the weight of authority. "A crime has been committed in this house. A crime most foul. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, a man of influence and purpose, lies dead, and the hand that struck him is among us. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover that hand, but I require your cooperation. Let us proceed with order and method." Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, her composure fraying, dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief.
"Mr. Poirot, this is unbearable. To think that one of us... It's unthinkable."
Poirot inclined his head, his expression sympathetic but unyielding. "Madame, the unthinkable is often the truth we refuse to see. Now, let us establish the timeline of this tragedy. Dinner ended at 10 o'clock, oui? And the scream, it came at 2:17 a.m. That leaves us 4 hours and 17 minutes unaccounted for. I wish to know precisely what each of you did in that time." Julian Ashbourne, sprawled in an armchair, snorted derisively. "You've already asked us that, Poirot. We were in our rooms. What more do you want?" Poirot's gaze fixed on Julian, and Hastings noted the faint tightening of the detective's lips. "Monsieur Julian, it is not enough to say you were in your room. The human mind, it wonders, it observes, it hears. Did you perhaps hear a footstep in the corridor, a door creaking, a voice, however faint?" Julian's bravado faltered, and he stubbed out his cigarette with unnecessary force. "I told you. I was asleep. Whiskey knocks me out. I didn't hear a thing." Clara Denham, seated at a writing desk, her hands folded neatly, spoke up. "I was working, as I said. Sir Reginald had asked me to prepare a draft of his announcement for tomorrow. Today, I suppose. I was at my desk until nearly 2. Then I went to bed." Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. "An announcement, Mademoiselle Denham? Can you share its nature?" Clara hesitated, her eyes flicking to Lady Evelyn. "It was a revision to his will. He intended to announce it to the family tomorrow. I don't know the details. He was very particular about privacy." A murmur rippled through the room. Lady Evelyn's hand froze, her handkerchief suspended mid-air.
"His will?" she whispered. "He said nothing to me."
"About, well, family matters. I heard that thud, as I told you, around 2 o'clock. I thought it was nothing, but I went to investigate. That's when I saw the light under the study door and... oh, it's too horrible."
Victor Crane, who had been silent, leaned forward, his voice measured. "I was in my room, reviewing contracts. I heard nothing until the scream. But Mr. Poirot, surely the note, 'The truth will out,' suggests a motive tied to Sir Reginald's announcement. Perhaps someone knew what he intended to say." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A perceptive observation, Monsieur Crane. The note, it is indeed a clue, but not necessarily in the way you imagine. It is too deliberate, too staged. The killer wishes us to follow a particular path, but I, Poirot, do not follow paths laid by others." Hastings, listening intently, felt a familiar thrill. Poirot's method was unfolding. His insistence on precision, his refusal to accept the obvious. The detective turned to the housemaid, who stood nervously by the door. "Mademoiselle, you said you telephoned the police. Did you see or hear anything unusual before the scream?" The maid, a young woman named Elsie, blushed under Poirot's scrutiny. "No, sir. I was in the servants' quarters, asleep. The house was quiet until Mrs. Langley screamed." Poirot nodded, then turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, please fetch me the guest list and the layout of the manor. I must understand the geography of this crime." Hastings hurried to the butler, who provided a neatly typed list of guests and a hand-drawn map of the manor's second floor, where the bedrooms and Sir Reginald's study were located. The study was at the end of the east wing, accessible via a long corridor with rooms branching off on either side. Sir Reginald's room was adjacent to the study, followed by Lady Evelyn's, Julian's, Clara's, Dr. Warwick's, Mrs. Langley's, and Crane's, with Poirot and Hastings in the west wing. Poirot studied the map, his finger tracing the corridor. "The study is isolated, yet not inaccessible. The killer could have approached from any room in the east wing without being seen, provided the house was quiet. And yet, Madame Langley heard a thud. A curious detail, no?" Before Hastings could respond, Inspector Grayson re-entered, his face grim. "Mr. Poirot, the surgeon confirms Sir Reginald was killed between 1:30 and 2 a.m. The letter opener pierced his heart. Death was instantaneous. No signs of a struggle, which is odd. He must have known his killer, or they caught him."
"Yes," Lady Evelyn interjected, her voice trembling. "It's one of a set from the drawing room. Anyone could have taken it."
Poirot's gaze swept the room. "Anyone, madame, is precisely the problem. But fear not, Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is revealed." As the guests were dismissed to their rooms under the watchful eye of the constable, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, did you observe? Each alibi is vague, each motive veiled. The will, the announcement, the note, these are threads in a tapestry of deceit. Tomorrow, we shall visit the study again, and I shall examine the details that the police, in their haste, may overlook." Hastings nodded, though his mind was a whirl of questions. "Do you suspect someone already, Poirot?" Poirot smiled faintly. "I suspect everyone, Hastings, until the little grey cells tell me otherwise. Now to bed. The morning will bring new light, and with it, new truths." As they retired, the manor seemed to close in around them, its shadows whispering secrets that only Poirot could hope to unravel. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The pale light of dawn crept through the heavy curtains of Blackthorn Manor, casting a sombre glow over the drawing room where the guests had reconvened. It was now 7 a.m., and the air was thick with the weight of unspoken accusations. The police had cordoned off Sir Reginald Ashbourne's study, but Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the official barriers, had already begun his meticulous investigation. Captain Hastings, ever at his friend's side, marvelled at Poirot's unshakable composure. While the others fidgeted or whispered among themselves, Poirot stood like a conductor before an orchestra, ready to draw harmony from chaos. Inspector Grayson, looking weary but determined, had agreed to let Poirot conduct informal interviews while the police continued their forensic work. The guests, still shaken from the night's horror, sat in a semicircle, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and wariness. Poirot, his suit pristine and his moustache perfectly symmetrical, paced slowly before them, his hands clasped behind his back. Mes amis, he began, his voice clear and measured. A crime such as this is not a random act. It is a performance, carefully staged, with every detail chosen for a purpose. To uncover the truth, we must examine not only the actions, but the hearts of those present. I shall speak with each of you in turn, and I ask for complete candor. The smallest omission, it may be the key to unlocking this mystery. Hastings noted the tension in the room. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne sat rigidly, her hands folded in her interest.
Mrs. Beatrice Langley, still visibly shaken, clutched a rosary, her lips moving silently.
Victor Crane, the financier, leaned back, his sharp features betraying nothing but a faint curiosity. Poirot began with Lady Evelyn. Madame, let us speak of your husband. Sir Reginald was a man of many connections, oui? Did he have enemies, perhaps from his diplomatic days, who might wish him harm? Lady Evelyn's lips trembled, but her voice was steady.
Reginald was a powerful man, Mr. Poirot. Power attracts envy, but enemies? None that I knew of. He was respected, even feared in his circles. But here at Blackthorn, we were among friends. Or so I thought.
Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. And this announcement he planned for today, did he share its nature with you, even in passing? She shook her head, a flicker of pain crossing her features.
No, Reginald was private about such matters. He said only that it would affect us all. I assumed it was about the estate or his investments.
Poirot turned to Julian, who met his gaze with a defiant tilt of his chin. Monsieur Julian, you are the heir to Blackthorn Manor, are you not? Yet your demeanor suggests a certain dissatisfaction with your father. May I ask why? Julian's eyes narrowed, and he lit another cigarette, the flame trembling slightly. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. Yes, father and I didn't always see eye to eye. He thought I was a wastrel, squandering his money, but I didn't kill him. I was in my room, as I said. Poirot's smile was faint but piercing. Your room, oui. And yet, your room is but a few steps from the study. A man with a nightcap or two might still hear a sound, no? A creak, a whisper? Julian exhaled sharply. I heard nothing. I told you, I was out cold. Clara Denham was next, and Poirot's tone softened, though his eyes remained sharp. Mademoiselle Denham, you were Sir Reginald's confidant in matters of business. This revision to his will, can you tell us anything more? A name, perhaps, or a change in beneficiary? Clara's gaze was steady, but Hastings noticed a slight tightening of her jaw.
I'm afraid I cannot, Mr. Poirot. Sir Reginald dictated the terms to me yesterday afternoon, but the document was locked in his desk. I typed only a draft, and he intended to finalize it with his solicitor tomorrow.
Poirot's eyebrows rose. Locked in his desk, you say? And yet, the desk was undisturbed when we found him. Most curious. Dr. Warwick spoke up before Poirot could continue. Mr. Poirot, as a physician, I must point out that Sir Reginald's health was robust. He had no ailments that would suggest a natural death. The less confide in you about personal matters, a worry, perhaps, or a fear. Warwick hesitated, then shook his head. No, he was a private man. Our conversations were mostly about old times or medical matters. Mrs. Langley, her voice quavering, interjected. Mr. Poirot, I don't know what you hope to find by questioning us like this. It was a stranger, surely, an intruder. Why would any of us do such a thing? Poirot turned to her, his expression gentle. Madame Langley, the heart is a complex thing. Sometimes it harbors resentments we dare not voice. You heard a thud at 2 o'clock, oui? Can you describe it further? Mrs. Langley's fingers twisted the rosary. It was heavy, like something falling. I thought it was a branch against the window. But now I wonder... Victor Crane, who had been silent, spoke last. Mr. Poirot, you're looking for motives, but isn't it obvious? So Reginald's announcement was about to change someone's fortunes. That note, "The truth will out," suggests someone feared exposure. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Monsieur Crane, you are perceptive. But the truth, it is not always what it seems. The note may be a beacon, or it may be a shadow cast to mislead us. The interviews were interrupted by Inspector Grayson's return. Mr. Poirot, we found something in the study. You better come see. Poirot and Hastings followed Grayson to the study, where the police surgeon was packing his bag. On the desk, beside the blood-stained blotter, lay a small object, a gold cufflink engraved with the initials VC. It had been found beneath the chair, half hidden by the rug. Victor Crane, Hastings whispered, his pulse quickening. Poirot's expression was unreadable. Perhaps, mon ami. But a cufflink is easily dropped, easily planted. We must not leap to conclusions. Grayson, holding the cufflink in a handkerchief, frowned. We'll question Crane about this. It's a solid lead. Poirot shook his head. A lead, oui, but not the truth. The truth lies in the contradictions, Inspector. For example, why was the desk undisturbed if the killer searched for the will? And why was the letter opener, an object of beauty, chosen over a more practical weapon? Grayson grunted, clearly skeptical. You see a lot in little things, Mr. Poirot. It is the little things that matter most, Poirot replied. Now, I must examine the study myself. Hastings, note the time. 7:45 a.m. We shall reconstruct the night's events with precision. As Grayson and the constable stepped aside, Poirot moved through the study with the grace of a dancer, his eyes scanning every surface. He paused at the desk, then at the window, which was slightly ajar. Interesting, he murmured. The window is not locked. Yet
Petal from the gardens?
Poirot held it up to the light. Perhaps, but it is fresh, Hastings, and the gardens are far from this room. A curious detail, no? As they returned to the drawing room, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery deepen. Poirot's questions had stirred the surface, but beneath lay a tangle of motives and secrets. The cufflink, the petal, the note, each was a thread, and Poirot was already weaving them into a pattern only he could see. Chapter 5. The red herrings emerge. The morning sun, now fully risen, streamed through the tall windows of Blackthorn Manor, but its warmth did little to dispel the chill that had settled over the household. By 8:30 a.m., the drawing room had become a stage for suspicion, with the guests casting sidelong glances at one another, each wondering who among them had driven the ivory-handled letter opener into Sir Reginald Ashburn's heart. Hercule Poirot, ever the maestro of observation, stood near the fireplace, his small frame radiating an authority that belied his stature. Captain Hastings, seated with a notebook in hand, watched his friend with a mixture of awe and impatience, knowing that Poirot's methodical approach would soon unearth something significant, or so he hoped. Inspector Grayson had taken Victor Crane aside to question him about the gold cufflink engraved with VC found beneath the chair in the study. The financier's calm demeanor had cracked slightly under the inspector's scrutiny, and his voice carried a defensive edge as he insisted the cufflink must have been dropped days earlier during the meeting with Sir Reginald. "I'm not in the habit of losing my possessions," Crane had said, his tone clipped, "and I certainly didn't leave my room last night." Grayson, unconvinced, had ordered a search of Crane's belongings, a move that sent a ripple of unease through the other guests. Poirot, however, seemed less interested in the cufflink than in the broader tapestry of the crime. He had returned to the drawing room after a second examination of the study, his eyes bright with the quiet excitement that Hastings recognized as a sign of progress. "Mes amis," Poirot began, addressing the assembled group. "The police, they pursue the obvious, the cufflink, the note, the weapon. But I, Hercule Poirot, look beyond the obvious, The truth, it hides in the details that do not fit, in the contradictions that whisper of deceit. Let us consider the evidence anew. Lady Evelyn Ashburn, her face pale but composed, spoke first. Mr. Poirot, surely the cufflink points to Mr. Crane. Why else would it be there, so close to Reginald's body? Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. Madame, a cufflink is a small thing, easily dropped, easily placed. It is a clue, oui, but not necessarily the truth. Tell me, did you know of any disagreement?
Tightening on her handkerchief. Reginald mentioned once that Mr. Crane had proposed a risky investment scheme, one that Reginald refused, but he didn't seem angry, only dismissive.
Julian Ashburn, who had been pacing near the window, stopped abruptly. That's rich, Mother, acting as if Father didn't have enemies. Crane's the type who'd kill for a deal gone sour. Everyone knows he's ruthless. Crane, re-entering the room with Grayson, shot Julian a cold look. Careful, Ashburn. Accusations like that can ruin a man, especially when they're baseless. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Monsieur Julien, your passion is noted, but let us not leap to conclusions. Monsieur Crane, you say you were in your room all night, yet your cufflink suggests otherwise. Can you explain its presence in the study? Crane's jaw tightened. I told the inspector. I was in the study 2 days ago, discussing business with Sir Reginald. I must have lost it then. I don't make a habit of creeping about at night, stabbing people. Poirot nodded, his expression neutral. And yet the cufflink was found beneath the chair, not on the desk where one might expect a casual loss. A curious detail, no? Before Crane could respond, Clara Denham spoke up, her voice sharp. Mr. Poirot, you're making too much of this. The cufflink could have been kicked under the chair by anyone. Shouldn't we focus on the note? The truth will out. It sounds like someone was afraid of Sir Reginald's announcement. Poirot turned to her, his eyes narrowing slightly. Mademoiselle Denham, you are most perceptive. The note, it is indeed theatrical, but its purpose is unclear. Was it a warning, a confession, or a distraction? Tell me, what was the exact nature of your work for Sir Reginald last night? Clara's composure faltered for a moment, her fingers brushing the edge of her notebook. I told you, I was drafting a letter about his will. He gave me instructions, but they were vague, something about redistributing assets. He said he'd finalize it with his solicitor. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. And this letter, where is it now? It's in my room, Clara said quickly. I can fetch it if you like. Oui, please do, Poirot said, his tone polite but firm. Every document, every word may hold a clue. As Clara left to retrieve the letter, Hastings leaned closer to Poirot. Do you think she's hiding something, Poirot? She's awfully defensive. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mon ami, everyone hides something. The question is, what? Mademoiselle Denham is efficient, precise. She notices everything. Yet she claims ignorance of the will's details. It is a contradiction, and contradictions are the breadcrumbs of truth. Dr. Lionel, what
Distractions. Sir Reginald was killed with a letter opener, a weapon anyone could have taken from the drawing room. Shouldn't we consider who had access to it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Doctor, you are correct. The weapon was accessible, but accessibility is not motive. Tell me, did you ever treat Sir Reginald for any personal concerns? A fear, perhaps, or a suspicion? Warwick's expression hardened. I was his friend, not his confessor. He was in good health, as I said. If he had fears, he kept them to himself. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her rosary clicking nervously, interjected. Mr. Poirot, I keep thinking about that thud I heard. It was so distinct, like
something heavy falling. Could it have been the murder itself? Poirot turned to her, his expression gentle. Madame Langley, your observation is most valuable. A thud at 2 o'clock, followed by your discovery at 2:17. The timing, it is precise, and precision is the enemy of the careless criminal. Clara returned, holding a single sheet of typed paper. Here's the draft, she said, handing it to Poirot. It's incomplete, as I said. Sir Reginald was still refining his thoughts. Poirot scanned the document, his brow furrowing. It speaks of reallocating resources to ensure justice, but names no beneficiaries. Most curious. And this was typed last night, you say? Yes, Clara replied, her voice steady, but her eyes wary. Around midnight. Poirot folded the paper and handed it to Grayson, who had been listening intently. Inspector, this must be preserved. It may be a key, or it may be another herring, red, as they say. Grayson nodded, though his skepticism was evident. We're searching the grounds now, Mr. Poirot. If there was an intruder, we'll find evidence. But this cufflink, it's hard to ignore. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Ignore nothing, Inspector, but believe nothing until it is proven. The cufflink is a clue, oui, but it is too convenient. I suspect our killer wishes us to chase it, to divert us from the true path. As the interviews concluded, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, did you notice? The cufflink points to Crane. The note points to a secret. The letter points to the will. Each clue pulls us in a different direction, like a conjurer's trick. But the rose petal, that is a clue no one mentions, yet it lies at the heart of this puzzle. Hastings frowned. The petal? You think it's significant? Poirot's smile was cryptic. Everything is significant, Hastings, when one knows how to look. Now, let us advanced to 10:15 a.m., and Blackthorn Manor seemed to hold its breath under the weight of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder. The police, under Inspector Grayson's direction, had scoured the grounds for signs of an intruder, but found nothing. No footprints, no broken locks, no trace of an outsider. The evidence pointed inexorably to the closed circle of guests within the manor, and the atmosphere in the drawing room was now thick with mistrust. Hercule Poirot, however, appeared undaunted, his small frame moving with purposeful energy as he prepared to revisit the study. Captain Hastings followed, his notebook filled with observations, though he felt increasingly lost in the labyrinth of clues and contradictions. Poirot had insisted on a private examination of the crime scene, and Grayson, though initially resistant, had relented, recognizing the detective's reputation for uncovering what others missed. As they entered the study, the air was heavy with the lingering scent of blood and the faint perfume of roses, a detail that made Hastings pause. The room was much as they had left it. Sir Reginald's body had been removed by the police surgeon, but the blood-stained blotter remained on the desk, along with the scrawled note, "The truth will out." The ivory-handled letter opener, now in police custody, had left an indelible mark on Hastings' memory. Poirot moved with the precision of a watchmaker, his eyes scanning every surface. He paused at the desk, then knelt to examine the floor, his gloved fingers brushing the rug where the rose petal had been found. "Mon ami," he said, his voice low. "This petal, it is not a mere accident. It is fresh, vibrant, as if plucked only hours ago. Yet the rose gardens are outside, far from this room. How then did it come to be here?" Hastings frowned, peering at the spot where the petal had lain. Could it have been tracked in on someone's shoe? From the gardens, perhaps? Poirot shook his head, his moustache twitching. No, Hastings. The rug is clean, save for this single petal. It was placed here, deliberately or inadvertently, by the killer. And it is not alone in its significance. He rose and moved to the window, which remained slightly ajar. Observe, the latch is loose, but there are no marks of forced entry. The killer did not come from outside, but they may wish us to believe so. Hastings followed Poirot's gaze, his mind racing. You think the petal and the window are connected? A staged clue to make us think an intruder was involved. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisely, mon ami. The killer is clever. They weave a tapestry of misdirection. The cufflink, the note, the open window, all are threads designed to lead us astray. But there is one stopped at 1:47. Yet Sir Reginald was killed between 1:30 and 2 o'clock, according to the surgeon. Why did it stop? Was it struck? Tampered with? Or is it another clue left for us to find?
Hastings leaned closer, examining the clock. It's not broken, look. The key is still in place. Someone wound it down deliberately. Exactement, Poirot exclaimed, his voice tinged with excitement. This is no accident. The clock was stopped to mark a moment, to fix a time in our minds. But why 1:47? It is too precise to be random. Before Hastings could respond, Poirot's attention shifted to a small pile of papers on the desk, partially obscured by the blotter. He lifted them carefully, revealing a letter addressed to Sir Reginald, postmarked 3 days earlier. The handwriting was elegant, almost feminine, and the signature read simply, "A friend." The letter warned Sir Reginald to beware those closest to you, hinting at a betrayal within his inner circle. This, Poirot said, holding the letter aloft, is a most significant find. It suggests that Sir Reginald was aware of danger, yet he invited us all to this gathering. Why? To confront his betrayer? Or to test their loyalty? Hastings felt a chill. You think he knew someone was planning to kill him? Poirot's expression was grave. I think, Hastings, that Sir Reginald was a man who played chess with human lives. This announcement he planned, it was a move in a larger game, and the killer, they made their move first. They returned to the drawing room, where the guests were growing restless under the constable's watchful eye. Poirot held up the letter, his voice commanding silence. Mes amis, I have found something of interest. A letter warning Sir Reginald of betrayal. Does anyone know who this friend might be? The room erupted in murmurs. Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her throat, her eyes wide. A warning? He never mentioned it to me. Julian snorted, his voice bitter. Sounds like one of Father's games. He loved to manipulate people, make them squirm. Maybe he wrote it himself to stir things up. Clara Denham's eyes narrowed. That's absurd, Julian. Sir Reginald was cautious, not paranoid. If he received such a letter, he would have taken it seriously. Dr. Warwick, his face impassive, spoke up. As his physician, I can say he was under no undue stress. If he received a warning, he didn't share it with me. Mrs. Langley, her rosary clicking, whispered, It's a sign. Someone knew what was coming. Oh, it's too dreadful. Victor Crane, his composure regained, leaned forward. Mr. Poirot, this letter only complicates things. It could be from anyone, someone outside the manor even. Why focus on us? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Because, Monsieur Crane, the petal, the clock, the letter, all point to someone within these walls.
Grayson, who had joined them, frowned at the letter. We'll have the handwriting analysed, but it's a vague threat. Could be a prank. No, Inspector, Poirot said firmly. It is not prank. It is a piece of the puzzle, and the puzzle is taking shape. Tell me, has the search of Monsieur Crane's room yielded anything? Grayson shook his head. Nothing incriminating. His other cufflink was in his room, as he said. But we're not ruling him out. Poirot nodded, then turned to the group. I ask you all to think carefully. Did you see Sir Reginald after dinner? Did you hear anything? A voice, a step, a thud, before Mrs. Langley's scream. Silence greeted his words, but Hastings noted the subtle shifts in posture. Lady Evelyn's fingers tightening, Julian's averted gaze, Clara's rigid stillness. Poirot's questions were stirring something, though what, Hastings could not yet discern. As the guests were dismissed to their rooms for a brief respite, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, the stopped clock at 1:47, the rose petal, the letter, these are not random. They are signposts, left by a killer who is both bold and careful. But there is one detail we have not yet considered. The key to the desk. Hastings blinked. The key? Clara said the will was locked in the desk. Oui, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. And yet, the desk was undisturbed. If the killer sought the will, why not take it? Or did they already know its contents? Tomorrow we shall learn more. For now, observe, Hastings. The killer is watching us, and they are growing nervous. As they parted, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The clues were mounting, but so were the questions. And Poirot's little grey cells were only beginning to unravel the truth hidden in Blackthorn Manor's shadows. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The clock in Blackthorn Manor's drawing room struck noon, its chimes echoing through the heavy silence that had settled over the guests. The morning's discoveries, the stopped clock, the rose petal, the cryptic letter, had only deepened the mystery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder, and the air was now thick with unspoken accusations. Hercule Poirot, his demeanour as impeccable as ever, stood near the grand piano, his sharp eyes scanning the assembled group. Captain Hastings, seated with his notebook open, felt a growing unease. The clues were piling up, but the truth seemed to slip further away with each revelation. Inspector Grayson had returned from a brief...
Amis, Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. We have established the scene of the crime, the timeline, and the clues that point to the killer's hand. But now, we must dig deeper into the motives, the secrets, the lies that bind you to Sir Reginald and to each other. The truth, it is not found in objects alone, but in the hearts of those who conceal it. Lady Evelyn Ashburn, her composure strained, spoke first, her voice trembling slightly.
Mr. Poirot, I've told you everything I know. Reginald was a private man, but he was not cruel. Why would anyone here wish him harm?
Poirot's gaze softened, but only momentarily.
Madame, a man of Sir Reginald's stature does not reach 60 without crossing paths with those who resent him. Let us speak plainly. Was there, perhaps, a strain in your marriage? A matter of trust or fidelity?
Lady Evelyn's face flushed, and she rose abruptly, her handkerchief clutched tightly.
How dare you, Mr. Poirot? My marriage was private, and I will not have it dissected like some specimen.
Julian Ashburn, lounging in an armchair, let out a bitter laugh. Oh, come off it, mother. Everyone knew father had his dalliances. He wasn't exactly discreet, was he? That's why you've been so miserable for years. The room fell silent, the weight of Julian's words hanging heavily. Lady Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing, sinking back into her seat. Hastings, shocked by the outburst, glanced at Poirot, whose expression remained unreadable.
Monsieur Julian, Poirot said, his tone measured. You speak of your father's indiscretions. Were they recent? And did they involve anyone in this room?
Julian's bravado faltered, his cigarette trembling in his hand. I don't know specifics, just rumours.
Father was always charming with the ladies, especially. He stopped, his eyes flicking to Clara Denham. Clara's head snapped up, her face a mask of indignation. What are you implying, Julian? I was Sir Reginald's secretary, nothing more. If you're suggesting otherwise, you're a liar. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Mademoiselle Denham, let us not be hasty. Rumors, they are like shadows. They distort the truth, but often point to its shape. Did Sir Reginald ever confide in you about personal matters, beyond his business affairs? Clara's eyes narrowed, but her voice was steady. No, Mr. Poirot. Our relationship was professional. He trusted me with his correspondence, his schedule, his will, nothing more. Poirot nodded, then turned to Dr. Lionel Warwick, who had been watching the exchange with quiet intensity. Doctor, as Sir Reginald's friend, you must have known of his personal life. Did he ever speak of tensions with Julian's spending habits, but nothing that suggested danger? As for his marriage, I knew nothing beyond what one might observe. Distance, perhaps, but no overt conflict. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her rosary clicking nervously, spoke up.
Mr. Poirot, I can't bear this suspicion, but I must confess I overheard something last week. Reginald and Mr. Crane were arguing in the library. Something about money, investments gone wrong. It was heated, and Reginald said something about cutting ties.
Victor Crane, who had been silent, leaned forward, his voice cold. Mrs. Langley, you misheard. Sir Reginald and I had a disagreement about a business venture, yes, but it was resolved. He was satisfied with my explanation. I had no reason to harm him. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Monsieur Crane, you speak of satisfaction, yet the cufflink found in the study suggests a connection to you, and now an argument. Tell me, what was the nature of this venture? Crane hesitated, his fingers steepled. It was a speculative investment in overseas markets. Sir Reginald was cautious, but I convinced him it was sound. He withdrew his objections days ago. Poirot's moustache twitched. And yet Madame Langley heard cutting ties. A curious phrase, no? Perhaps it was not just about money. Before Crane could respond, Inspector Grayson re-entered, holding a small evidence bag. Mr. Poirot, we've found something else in the study. A receipt, tucked inside a book on the shelf. It's from a jeweler in London, dated 2 weeks ago, for a pair of emerald earrings. Expensive ones. Lady Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her chest.
Emerald earrings? Reginald never mentioned them. I don't own any such earrings.
Poirot's gaze sharpened. Madame, are you certain? A gift, perhaps, that he intended to present at his announcement? Lady Evelyn shook her head, her voice barely a whisper.
No, he gave me no such gift.
Julian sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Probably for one of his mistresses. Wouldn't be the first time. Clara Denham's face flushed, but she said nothing, her eyes fixed on the floor. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, felt a surge of excitement. Here was a new thread, one that hinted at hidden relationships and motives. Poirot turned to Grayson. Inspector, this receipt is most significant. We must ascertain who these earrings were for. And the book, where was it found? On a shelf near the desk, Grayson replied. A volume of Shakespeare's sonnets. The receipt was tucked inside, almost like it was hidden. Poirot's eyes lit up. Shakespeare, the poet of love and betrayal. A fitting choice.
To reflect. What did you see? What did you hear that you have not yet shared?
The guests exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Poirot's gaze lingered on each of them as though peering into their souls. Very well, he said at last. We shall reconvene after lunch. But know this, the truth cannot hide forever. The little grey cells, they are relentless. As the guests dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, did you observe? The earrings, the argument, the accusations, each points to a fracture in this household. But the rose petal, the stopped clock, the letter, they are the true keys. We must find the connection. Hastings frowned. You think the earrings are for someone here? Clara, perhaps? Poirot's smile was cryptic. Perhaps, Hastings. Or perhaps they are another herring, red and glittering. But the killer, they are growing careless. The lies, they pile up, and soon they will collapse. As they moved toward the dining room, Hastings felt the mystery tighten its grip. The clues were mounting, but so were the secrets, and Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth was beginning to expose the cracks in Blackthorn Manor's polished facade. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Blackthorn Manor's drawing room, where the guests had gathered once more after a strained and silent lunch. It was now 2 p.m., and the oppressive weight of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder hung over the household like a storm cloud. The revelations of the morning, the emerald earrings, the heated argument between Sir Reginald and Victor Crane, the whispered accusations of infidelity, had cracked the veneer of civility among the guests. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, stood before the group, his keen eyes noting every flicker of emotion. Captain Hastings, seated with his notebook, felt the tension in the room reach a breaking point, as though the manor itself were holding its breath, waiting for a confession to shatter the silence. Poirot had spent the early afternoon in private consultation with Inspector Grayson, reviewing the physical evidence and the layout of the manor. The police had found no trace of the emerald earrings, and the handwriting analysis of the note and the mysterious letter signed "A Friend" had yet to yield results. Yet Poirot seemed undeterred, his mind a whirl of connections that Hastings could only dimly perceive. Now, as the detective addressed the group, his voice carried a new intensity, a sign that he was closing in on a critical juncture in the investigation. Mes amis, Poirot began, his tone measured but piercing. We have uncovered much today. Clues that point to secrets. Secrets that point to motives. They have said, and I, Hercule Poirot, will not rest until that truth is revealed. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, her face pale and drawn, clutched her handkerchief, her eyes red from unshed tears.
Mr. Poirot, this is unbearable. You speak of truth, but all I feel is pain. Reginald is gone, and now we're tearing each other apart. What more do you want from us?
Poirot's expression softened, but his gaze remained steady. Madame, I seek only the truth, however painful. Let us speak of the earrings. They were purchased 2 weeks ago, yet you say they were not for you. Did Sir Reginald ever speak of another woman? Perhaps someone he intended to honor with such a gift? Lady Evelyn's composure cracked and a sob escaped her lips.
No, he didn't. But Julian was right. Reginald was not always faithful. There were whispers, always whispers, but I never asked. I couldn't bear to know.
Julian Ashbourne, who had been pacing near the window, spun around, his face contorted with anger. Don't play the martyr, Mother. You knew about Father's affairs and did nothing, and now you're surprised someone hated him enough to kill him? Maybe it was you, tired of being humiliated. The room gasped, and Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her chest, her eyes wide with shock.
Julian, how could you say such a thing? I loved your father, despite everything.
Clara Denham, her voice sharp, intervened. "That's enough, Julian. You're lashing out because you're scared. We're all scared. But accusing your own mother, that's low, even for you." Julian's face flushed, and he sank into a chair, his hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Mother. I didn't mean it. It's just, this is all too much." Poirot's eyes gleamed, and Hastings recognized the look. The detective had seen something in Julian's outburst, a crack in the facade that revealed a deeper truth. "Monsieur Julien," Poirot said softly, "your anger, it is understandable, but it is also revealing. Tell me, what did you know of your father's plans for his will? Did he share his intentions with you?" Julian hesitated, his eyes darting to the floor. He mentioned something about changing things, said I needed to prove myself before I'd inherit anything significant. I thought he was just trying to control me, like always. Poirot nodded, then turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle Denham, you drafted the letter about the will. Did Sir Reginald mention his son specifically?" Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, her composure strained.
Man to provoke violence.
Poirot's moustache twitched. "Doctor, your loyalty is admirable, but it blinds you. Every grievance, every secret is a thread in this tapestry of murder. Tell me, did you ever treat Sir Reginald for any emotional distress? A man with enemies, as this letter suggests, might feel fear." Warwick adjusted his glasses, his expression guarded. "He was under some stress, yes, but nothing unusual for a man of his responsibilities. He never spoke of fear." Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her rosary clutched tightly, broke into the conversation, her voice trembling. "Mr. Poirot, I can't keep silent any longer. I saw something last night, before the scream. I didn't mention it because I wasn't sure, but I saw Clara leaving her room around 1:30. She was heading toward the east wing." Clara's face went pale, and she stood abruptly, her notebook falling to the floor. "That's a lie. I was in my room, working, as I said. Why would you say such a thing, Beatrice?" Mrs. Langley shrank back, her eyes wide. "I'm not lying. I saw you, Clara, in the corridor. You were carrying something, a paper, I think. I didn't want to believe it, but—" The room erupted in murmurs, and Inspector Grayson, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. "Miss Denham, can you explain this? If Mrs. Langley saw you, that puts you near the study at the time of the murder." Clara's eyes flashed with defiance. "I wasn't there. Beatrice is mistaken, or she's lying to protect herself. I was in my room until the scream woke me." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Madame Langley, this is a serious accusation. You are certain of the time and the person you saw?" Mrs. Langley nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Mr. Poirot. It was Clara, I swear it." Victor Crane, who had been watching the exchange with a calculating gaze, spoke up. "Mr. Poirot, this is getting us nowhere. First my cufflink, now Clara's alleged wandering. You're chasing shadows. The real question is the will. What was in it and who stood to lose?" Poirot's gaze fixed on Crane. "Monsieur Crane, you are correct. The will is central, but it is not the only key. The rose petal, the stopped clock, the letter, these are not shadows, but signposts. And now, Madame Langley's revelation adds another. Mademoiselle Denham, I must ask you to produce the draft of the will you mentioned. It may clarify much." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "It's in my room. I'll get it." As she left, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, did you see? The crack in the facade. It is widening. Mrs. Langley's confession, Clara's denial, Julian's outburst, these are not me."
That the killer is growing desperate. The lies, they are crumbling, and soon we shall see the face behind the mask. As Clara returned with the draft, the room held its breath, and Hastings knew that Poirot's relentless pursuit was about to uncover a truth that would change everything. Chapter 9. The trap is set. The clock in Blackthorn Manor's drawing room chimed 3:30 p.m., its somber notes cutting through the charged atmosphere. The guests, their nerves frayed by the morning's revelations and Mrs. Beatrice Langley's accusation against Clara Denham, sat in uneasy silence, their eyes darting between one another and Hercule Poirot. The little Belgian detective stood at the center of the room, his posture impeccable, his moustache gleaming under the afternoon light. Captain Hastings, clutching his notebook, felt the tension coiling tighter, as though the manor itself were a spring about to snap. Poirot, he knew, was preparing to tighten the noose around the killer, and this gathering was no mere discussion. It was a trap. Clara Denham had returned with the draft of Sir Reginald Ashburn's will, a single sheet of typed paper that she handed to Poirot with a trembling hand. Her face was pale, her usual composure shattered by Mrs. Langley's claim that she had been seen in the corridor near the study at 1:30 a.m. Poirot took the document, his eyes scanning it with the precision of a jeweler examining a flawed gem. The room watched in silence, the weight of anticipation palpable. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of steel. "We stand at a crossroads in this investigation. The clues, the cufflink, the rose petal, the stopped clock, the letter, the earrings, and now this draft of the will point to a crime of calculation, not passion. The killer has woven a web of deception, but they have made one fatal error. They have underestimated Hercule Poirot. Today we shall apply pressure, and the truth, it will emerge." He held up the draft, his gaze sweeping the room. "This document, prepared by Mademoiselle Denham, speaks of reallocating assets to ensure justice, but it names no beneficiaries. It is vague, yet deliberate. Mademoiselle Denham, you say you typed this last night at Sir Reginald's instruction. Yet, Madame Langley saw you in the corridor at 1:30 near the study. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Clara's eyes flashed with defiance, but her voice trembled. "I've told you, Mr. Poirot. I was in my room. Beatrice is mistaken, or lying. I typed the draft before midnight and went to bed. I didn't leave my room until the scream." Mrs. Langley, her rosary clicking furiously, shook her head. "I know what I saw, Mr. Poirot. It was Clara, carrying a paper, heading toward the East Wing. I'm not mistaken." Lady Evelyn Ashburn, her face etched with exhaustion, spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Poirot, please. This is tearing us apart. Clara has been loyal to our family for years. Why would she harm Reginald?" Poirot's expression, "The will, why not take it? Or did they already know its contents?" Julian Ashbourne, his face flushed with agitation, leaned forward. "That's what I've been saying, Poirot. Father was playing games with us. His announcement, the will, all of it. He wanted to control us, even from the grave. Maybe Clara knew what he was planning and didn't like it." Clara's voice rose, sharp and indignant. "That's absurd, Julian. I was his secretary, not his conspirator. If you're looking for motive, why not look at yourself? You were furious with him over money." Julian's hands clenched into fists, but before he could retort, Dr. Lionel Warwick intervened, his tone calm but firm. "Mr. Poirot, this speculation is getting us nowhere. The will, the earrings, the cufflink, these are distractions. The real question is who had access to the study and the letter opener." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Docteur, you are correct. Access is key. But so is motive. Let us consider the earrings, a gift, purchased 2 weeks ago, yet not for Madame Ashbourne. For whom, then? And the letter signed, "A friend," warning of betrayal. Did it come from someone in this room? Victor Crane, who had been watching the exchange with a detached air, spoke up.
Mr. Poirot, you're building a case on assumptions. The earrings could have been for anyone, a business associate, a charity auction. And the letter, it's vague, meaningless, without context.
Poirot turned to Crane, his smile faint but piercing. Monsieur Crane, nothing is meaningless in a murder. Your cufflink, found in the study, suggests a connection. Your argument with Sir Reginald, overheard by Madame Langley, suggests a motive. And yet, you remain calm? Why? Crane's eyes narrowed.
Because I'm innocent, Mr. Poirot. I've nothing to hide.
Poirot nodded, then turned to the group. Let us conduct a small experiment. I ask each of you to recount your movements from 1 a.m. to 2:17 a.m. But this time, I wish you to describe not what you did, but what you felt. The heart, it speaks when the mind seeks to conceal. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, but Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. Lady Evelyn spoke first, her voice trembling. I felt alone. Reginald and I had grown distant, and I lay awake, wondering what his announcement would mean for us. I heard nothing until the scream. Julian snorted, his voice bitter. I felt trapped. Father's constant lectures about responsibility, his threats to cut me off. It was suffocating. I drank to forget, and I slept. Clara's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her tension, trying to distract myself, until the scream. Mrs. Langley's voice quavered. I felt afraid. The manor was so quiet, yet I sensed something wrong. That thud at 2 o'clock, it chilled me. I felt I had to check. Crane leaned back, his expression cool. I felt focused, reviewing contracts, planning my next move. I felt nothing out of the ordinary until the scream. Poirot's eyes narrowed, and he clapped his hands sharply. Merci, mes amis. Your words? They reveal much. The heart, it cannot lie as easily as the tongue. And now, I propose we gather in the study. I wish to reconstruct the events of last night, with your assistance. The guests hesitated, but Grayson, intrigued, nodded. All right, Mr. Poirot, let's see what you're getting at. In the study, Poirot positioned each guest according to their stated locations at 1:30 a.m., using the manor's layout. He placed Clara near her room, Mrs. Langley at her door, and the others in their respective rooms. He then walked the corridor, pausing at the study door. Madame Langley, you heard a thud at 2 o'clock. Let us assume it was the moment of the murder. Show me where you stood when you saw Mademoiselle Denham. Mrs. Langley, trembling, pointed to a spot near her door. Here, Mr. Poirot. The light was dim, but I saw her clearly moving toward the study. Clara's face flushed. I wasn't there. She's lying. Poirot raised a hand. Come, mademoiselle. Let us test the light. He dimmed the wall sconces, recreating the nighttime conditions. Madame Langley, look again. Could you have mistaken another for Mademoiselle Denham? Mrs. Langley faltered, her eyes wide. I suppose it's possible. The light was so faint. Poirot's smile was triumphant. Exactement. The trap, it is sprung. The killer relies on our assumptions, but I, Poirot, rely on proof. The petal, the clock, the letter. They point to a truth we are close to uncovering. As the guests returned to the drawing room, Hastings whispered, You're pushing them, Poirot. Someone's bound to break soon. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Oui, mon ami. The pressure, it builds, and the killer, they will falter. The trap is set, and the truth is near. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor's drawing room, casting a golden haze over the gathered guests. It was 4:45 p.m., and the tension in the room was palpable, each face etched with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small frame radiating an almost theatrical authority. His moustache, earrings, and the draft of the will would be woven into a coherent tapestry of truth. Inspector Grayson stood by the door, his arms crossed, watching Poirot with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. The guests, Lady Evelyn Ashburn, Julian Ashburn, Clara Denham, Dr. Lionel Warwick, Mrs. Beatrice Langley, and Victor Crane, sat in a semicircle, their expressions ranging from defiance to resignation. Poirot had orchestrated this gathering with precision, and Hastings knew that the detective's little grey cells had pieced together the final picture of Sir Reginald Ashburn's murder.
Mes amis, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, we have come to the heart of this tragedy. Sir Reginald Ashburn was murdered in his study between 1:30 and 2 a.m., struck down by an ivory-handled letter opener, a weapon chosen with care. The clues, the cufflink, the rose petal, the stopped clock, the letter signed "A Friend," the emerald earrings, the draft of the will, have led us through a labyrinth of deception. But now, I, Hercule Poirot, shall reveal the truth, step by step, with order and method. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us begin with the crime itself. Sir Reginald was killed in his study, with no signs of a struggle. This suggests he knew his killer, trusted them enough to turn his back. The letter opener, taken from the drawing room, was not a weapon of impulse, but of intention. The note, "The truth will out," was a theatrical flourish, designed to mislead us into thinking the motive was a secret about to be exposed. But the truth, it is more complex. Poirot turned to the guests, his gaze piercing. The cufflink, engraved with VC, pointed to Monsieur Crane, yet it was too convenient, found beneath the chair, as if placed there to incriminate him. The rose petal, fresh and out of place in the study, suggested a connection to the gardens, yet no one had been outside. The clock, stopped at 1:47, was a deliberate act, not an accident. The letter warning of betrayal hinted at a deeper conspiracy. The emerald earrings, purchased but never given, suggested a hidden relationship, and the draft of the will, vague yet provocative, pointed to a motive rooted in inheritance. Lady Evelyn's voice trembled as she spoke. Mr. Poirot, please, tell us who did this. The suspense is unbearable. Poirot's smile was faint but resolute. Patience, madame. Let us first consider the motives. Sir Reginald was a man of power, wealth, and secrets. His announcement, planned for the morning of his death, was to reveal a change in his will. This change, I believe, threatened someone in this room. A threat so great that they chose murder to prevent it. He turned to Clara Denham, whose face was pale but composed. Mademoiselle Denham, you drafted the will. You claimed it was vague, but I suspect you knew more than you admitted. Madame Langley saw you in the corridor
Toward the study. You denied this. But the light was dim, and mistakes can be made. Yet your role as Sir Reginald's confidant gave you access to his secrets and his plans. Clara's eyes flashed. I told you. I was in my room. I had no reason to kill him. Poirot nodded, then turned to Victor Crane. Monsieur Crane, your cufflink was found in the study, and you argued with Sir Reginald about a failed investment. You stood to lose his trust and perhaps his financial support. Yet your composure suggests a man who calculates every move. Crane's voice was cold. I've said it before, Poirot. I didn't kill him. The cufflink was planted, and the argument was resolved. Poirot's gaze shifted to Julian. Monsieur Julian, your resentment toward your father was evident. He threatened to cut you from his will, to demand you prove yourself. Such a threat could drive a desperate man to desperate acts. Julian's face flushed, but he said nothing, his hands clenched into fists. Poirot continued, addressing Dr. Warwick. Doctor, you were Sir Reginald's friend, yet you remained distant, observing rather than engaging. Did you know of his plans, perhaps through a medical confidence?
Warwick shook his head. I knew nothing of his will or his announcement. I was his physician, not his confidant. Mrs. Langley, clutching her rosary, whispered,
Mr. Poirot, please. Was it Clara or someone else?
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room.
Let us reconstruct the night. At 1:30, the manor was quiet. Sir Reginald was in his study, preparing for his announcement. The killer entered, took the letter opener, and struck him down. The clock was stopped at 1:47. The note was left, and the petal fell, perhaps from a boutonniere or a dress. The killer then returned to their room unnoticed, except, perhaps, by Madame Langley.
He paused, his eyes locking onto Lady Evelyn.
But the true motive lies not in the will alone, but in the heart. The earrings, purchased for an unknown recipient, suggest a betrayal of the heart. And the letter, signed "A Friend," was no friend at all. It was a warning from the killer, sent to unsettle Sir Reginald, to lure him into a false sense of security.
Poirot's voice rose, commanding the room.
The killer is among us, and it is you, Mademoiselle Clara Denham.
The room gasped, and Clara leapt to her feet, her face white with shock.
That's preposterous. I was loyal to Sir Reginald. I had no motive.
Poirot's gaze was unrelenting.
Oh, but you did, mademoiselle. The earrings were for you. A gift from Sir Reginald, who had grown too fond of his efficient secretary. You were seen in the corridor, carrying...
Clara's voice broke.
No, you have no proof.
Poirot held up the draft of the will.
This document, it was typed on your typewriter. But the ribbon shows signs of tampering. Fresh ink, as if rewritten. And the letter signed, "A Friend." Its handwriting matches the draft, a detail you could not conceal. You killed Sir Reginald to secure your future, knowing his announcement would expose your affair and your manipulation of the will.
Clara collapsed into her chair, sobbing.
I didn't mean to. He was going to ruin me, expose me. I loved him, but he was going to cast me aside.
Grayson stepped forward, his face grim. Miss Denham, you're under arrest. As the constable led Clara away, the room fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over the guests. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low.
Mon ami, the heart, it betrays us all. The little grey cells, they see what the heart conceals.
Hastings nodded, stunned. The trap had been sprung, and the truth had emerged, as Poirot had promised. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The drawing-room of Blackthorn Manor was cloaked in a heavy silence as the clock struck 5:30 p.m., its chimes a solemn reminder of the day's harrowing events. The revelation of Clara Denham's guilt in the murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne had left the guests in a state of stunned disbelief, their faces reflecting a mix of relief and sorrow. Hercule Poirot, his small frame poised with quiet dignity, stood near the fireplace, his eyes softened by a rare moment of introspection. Captain Hastings, seated with his notebook now closed, felt the weight of the case lift, though questions lingered in his mind. Poirot's triumph was undeniable, yet there was a somberness to his demeanour that hinted at the cost of uncovering the truth. Inspector Grayson had escorted Clara to a waiting police car, her wrists bound and her head bowed in defeat. The other guests, Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, Julian Ashbourne, Dr. Lionel Warwick, Mrs. Beatrice Langley, and Victor Crane, remained in the drawing-room, their expressions a tapestry of exhaustion and unease. The manor, once a symbol of grandeur, now felt like a mausoleum, its walls echoing the tragedy that had unfolded within. Poirot cleared his throat, drawing the group's attention. His voice, though gentle, carried the authority of a man who'd seen the darkest corners of human nature. "Mes amis," he began, "the case is closed. Mademoiselle Denham has confessed to the murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, driven by a tangled web of love, ambition, and fear. But before I take my leave, I wish to reflect on the nature of this crime, for it is in understanding the why that we find clarity." Lady Evelyn, her eyes red from tears, spoke first.
The truth is found not in the abundance of clues, but in their harmony. The cufflink, the rose petal, the stopped clock, the letter, the earrings, these were threads, but they were not random. Each pointed to a mind that sought to mislead, yet could not escape its own patterns. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Consider the rose petal, so fresh and out of place in the study. It came from Mademoiselle Denham's corsage, worn at dinner, a detail she overlooked in her haste. The clock, stopped at 1:47, was a deliberate act to confuse the timeline, but it was too precise, suggesting a mind accustomed to precision. The letter signed "A Friend" was written in her hand, a warning meant to unsettle Sir Reginald and mask her true intent. The cufflink, belonging to Monsieur Crane, was a clever misdirection, placed to cast suspicion elsewhere. And the earrings, they were the key to her heart. A gift from Sir Reginald, a token of an affair that had turned sour. Julian Ashbourne, his earlier bravado replaced by a quiet intensity, leaned forward.
"But why, Poirot? Why kill him? If she loved him, why not just leave?"
Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone was firm. "Monsieur Julien, love is a powerful motive, but so is betrayal. Mademoiselle Denham believed Sir Reginald would expose their affair, perhaps even remove her from his will. She saw the earrings not as a gift, but as a farewell, a sign that he intended to cast her aside. In her desperation, she altered the draft of the will to secure her future, then killed him to ensure her secret remained hidden." Dr. Warwick adjusted his glasses, his voice tinged with regret. "I should have seen it. As his friend, I knew Reginald was complicated, but I never imagined Clara capable of such a thing." Poirot nodded. "Doctor, their heart conceals its darkest impulses, even from those closest. Mademoiselle Denham was efficient, loyal, but beneath her composure lay a woman driven by fear of ruin. It is a lesson, no? That we must look beyond the surface, to the contradictions of human nature."
Mrs. Langley, her rosary now still, looked at Poirot with awe.
"Your mind, Mr. Poirot, it's extraordinary. But how do you bear it, knowing such terrible truths?"
Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression was solemn. "Madame, the truth, it is a burden, but also a necessity. Without it, we are lost in a world of shadows. I, Hercule Poirot, seek order, method, and justice. The little grey cells, they do not rest until the puzzle is complete."
Victor Crane, who had remained silent, spoke.
Choices, his and Mademoiselle Denham's. Hastings, listening intently, felt a pang of admiration for his friend. Poirot's ability to unravel the human heart was unmatched. Yet there was a quiet sadness in his words, a recognition of the pain his revelations caused.
"Poirot," Hastings said softly, "you always say the truth is worth it, but doesn't it weigh on you?"
Poirot turned to him, his smile faint but warm.
"Mon ami, it is a weight I bear gladly, for it is the price of justice. But now, our work here is done. The police will handle the rest, and we shall depart."
He addressed the group one final time.
"Mes amis, I take my leave of you. Blackthorn Manor has revealed its secrets, and I hope you will find peace in the light of truth. Adieu.
As the guests murmured their thanks, Poirot and Hastings made their way to the entrance hall, where their bags awaited. The manor's grandeur seemed diminished, its walls heavy with the memory of betrayal. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the gardens in gold, a stark contrast to the darkness within. As they stepped onto the gravel drive, Hastings glanced at Poirot.
You were brilliant, as always. But I can't help wondering, did Clara act alone, or was there more to this we didn't see?
Poirot's eyes twinkled.
Mon ami, you are learning to question, which is good. I am satisfied that Mademoiselle Denham is the killer, but the human heart is deep, and there may be secrets yet unspoken. For now, let us leave Blackthorn Manor to its ghosts.
They climbed into the waiting car, and as the manor receded into the distance, Hastings felt a sense of closure, though the echoes of the case lingered. Poirot, gazing out the window, seemed lost in thought, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, the next truth to be uncovered. The car rolled through the Devon countryside, and Blackthorn Manor faded into the haze, a monument to a mystery solved by the relentless brilliance of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The twilight shadows lengthened across the Devon countryside as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings sat in the back of the chauffeured car, winding their way from Blackthorn Manor toward the train station in Exeter. It was 6:15 p.m., and the day's revelations had left a profound stillness in their wake. The arrest of Clara Denham for the murder of Sir Reginald Ashburn had brought the case to a close, yet Hastings felt a nagging unease, as though some piece of the puzzle remained just out of reach. Poirot, his posture impeccable despite the long day, gazed out the window, his expression serene but thoughtful, a sign that his little grey cells were still at work. The manor, with its force, yet something about the case felt unresolved. He turned to Poirot, his voice low so as not to disturb the driver. Poirot, you were brilliant back there as always, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more to this. Clara's motive, love and betrayal, it explains the murder, but what about the will? And the letter signed a friend, are we certain she acted alone?
Poirot's moustache twitched, and he turned to Hastings with a faint, enigmatic smile.
Mon ami, you are developing the instincts of a detective, which pleases me greatly. You are correct. There are echoes in this case, questions that linger like the scent of roses in the air. But let us reflect on what we know, and perhaps the echoes will clarify themselves.
He leaned back, his hands folded neatly in his lap.
Clara Denham killed Sir Reginald because she feared exposure. The earrings, a gift from a man who loved her but intended to end their affair, were her breaking point. She altered the draft of the will to secure her future, and when Sir Reginald summoned her to the study, perhaps to confront her, she struck him down with the letter opener. The rose petal from her corsage betrayed her presence. The stopped clock, set at 1:47, was her attempt to confuse the timeline. The note, "The truth will out," was her taunt, a reflection of her own guilt. And the cufflink, that was her cleverest move, implicating Monsieur Crane to divert suspicion.
Hastings nodded, scribbling a note in his mind to revisit the cufflink.
But the letter, signed, a friend. You said it was in her handwriting. Why would she warn Sir Reginald of betrayal if she planned to kill him?
Poirot's eyes gleamed.
An excellent question, Hastings. The letter was not a warning, but a manipulation. Clara sent it to unsettle Sir Reginald, to make him suspect others, perhaps his wife or his son, or even Monsieur Crane. It was a psychological gambit designed to make him vulnerable, to draw him to the study that night to discuss his fears. She knew his habits, his pride, and she used them against him.
Hastings frowned, his mind racing.
And the will? If she altered it, why didn't she take it from the desk? It was locked, but she had access.
Poirot's smile widened.
Because, mon ami, she did not need to take it. The draft she showed us was a forgery, typed to mislead us. The true will, locked in the desk, remains untouched. I suspect it contains provisions that would have shocked the household. Perhaps disinheriting Julian or favoring an unexpected beneficiary. But Clara's plan was to present her forged draft as the final word, to secure her share before the
Her mistake was underestimating the power of the little grey cells. The car slowed as they approached the station, the platform bustling with evening travellers. Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise as always.
But let us consider the others, Hastings. Lady Evelyn, heartbroken yet complicit in her silence about her husband's affairs. Julian, resentful and reckless but not a killer. Dr. Warwick, loyal yet distant, perhaps hiding his own knowledge of Sir Reginald's plans. Mrs. Langley, nervous and observant, whose testimony exposed Clara. And Monsieur Crane, whose cufflink was a convenient scapegoat. Each played a role, however small, in the drama of Blackthorn Manor. Hastings hesitated, then ventured. Do you think any of them suspected Clara? Or were they all just pawns?
Poirot's gaze turned distant, his voice tinged with melancholy.
In a house of secrets, mon ami, everyone suspects something, but few see the truth. The human heart is a labyrinth, and even those who dwell within it may not know its depths. I believe Madame Langley saw more than she admitted, and perhaps Dr. Warwick knew of Sir Reginald's affair, but chose silence out of loyalty. But they were not accomplices, merely witnesses to a tragedy they could not prevent.
The car stopped, and the driver opened the door. As they stepped onto the platform, the cool evening air was a welcome relief after the stifling atmosphere of the manor. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who seemed lost in thought.
You always say the truth is worth it, Poirot, but this case has left a family in ruins. Was it worth it?
Poirot paused, his eyes fixed on the horizon.
The truth, Hastings, is a double-edged sword. It cuts through deception, but it leaves wounds. For Lady Evelyn, for Julian, for the others, the truth is painful, but it is also a path to healing. Without it, they would live in the shadow of lies. And I, Hercule Poirot, cannot abide a world without order.
They boarded the train, settling into a quiet compartment. As the engine roared to life, Hastings felt a sense of closure, though the echoes of Blackthorn Manor lingered.
What's next, Poirot? Another case? Another puzzle?
Poirot's smile was faint but warm.
Always, mon ami. The world is full of mysteries, and the little grey cells, they are never idle. But for now, let us rest. The truth has been served, and that is enough.
As the train pulled away, carrying them back to London, Hastings the turmoil of the past 24 hours. It was now 7 p.m., and the compartment where Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings sat was bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. Poirot, his hands folded neatly in his lap, gazed out at the passing fields, his expression one of quiet contemplation. Hastings, however, could not shake a lingering restlessness, his mind still entangled in the intricacies of the Blackthorn Manor case. Clara Denham's confession had resolved the murder, yet Hastings felt there were threads left unpulled, questions unanswered that only Poirot's relentless logic could address. Hastings shifted in his seat, his notebook resting on his knee. "Poirot," he ventured, his voice low to avoid disturbing the other passengers. "I know you've solved the case, and Clara's confession ties up most of the loose ends, but there's something that doesn't sit right with me. The will, the real one, locked in Sir Reginald's desk. We never saw it. What if it holds another secret? Something Clara didn't know?" Poirot turned from the window, his eyes twinkling with that familiar spark of intellectual vigor. "Mon ami, you are becoming most perceptive. The will, oui, it is a thread we have not fully explored. But do not mistake my silence for oversight. The little grey cells, they continue to work, even when the case appears closed." He leaned forward, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Let us review the facts. Clara Denham killed Sir Reginald to prevent the exposure of their affair and to secure her future through a forged draft of his will. The rose petal, the stott clock, the note, the cufflink, all were part of her plan to mislead us. But the true will, locked in the desk, was not taken. Why? Because Clara believed her forgery would suffice, or because she knew its contents and feared they would implicate her further." Hastings frowned, his pen tapping against his notebook. "But what if the will names someone else, someone who had a motive we haven't considered? Could there be another player in this game, someone who influenced Clara?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement. "You suspect a conspiracy, Hastings? It is possible, but unlikely. The evidence points to Clara acting alone, driven by her own desperation. Yet the will, it is a question worth pursuing. When we return to London, I shall contact Sir Reginald's solicitor. The contents of the true will may shed light on the shadows that remain." The train swayed gently, and Hastings leaned back, his mind racing. "And what about the others? Lady Evelyn, Julian, Dr. Warwick, Mrs. Langley, Crane. They all had secrets. Could one of them have known what?" Julian's resentment was fueled by his father's control. Yet he lacked the cunning to kill. Dr. Warwick, loyal but reserved, may have suspected Sir Reginald's affair, but valued discretion above all. Mrs. Langley, with her nervous observations, saw more than she understood, and Monsieur Crane, ambitious and calculating, was a convenient scapegoat, but not a murderer. They were pieces on the board, but Clara was the player. Hastings nodded, though his unease persisted. "And the letter signed a friend? You're certain Clara wrote it?" Poirot's smile was cryptic. The handwriting. It matched the draft of the will. A clever forgery, but not perfect. Clara sent the letter to unsettle Sir Reginald, to draw him to the study under the guise of discussing his fears. It was a psychological trap, and he fell into it. The compartment fell silent, the only sound the steady rhythm of the train. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who seemed lost in thought, his fingers tracing the edge of his hat. "You always say the truth is worth it, Poirot, but this case feels different. Clara's confession, it's so personal, so raw. It makes me wonder if there's more we could have done to prevent this." Poirot's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on Hastings' arm. "Mon ami, you have a heart that feels deeply, and that is a strength, but we cannot prevent what the heart conceals. Clara's choice was her own, born of love turned to desperation. Our role is not to prevent,
but to reveal, to bring order to chaos. The truth, it is painful, but it is the foundation of justice. Hastings sighed, his gaze drifting to the window. I suppose you're right, but I can't help thinking about Lady Evelyn and Julian. They've lost so much. A husband, a father, and now their trust in those around them. Poirot nodded, his expression grave. The wounds of Blackthorn Manor will heal slowly, but they will heal. Lady Evelyn will find strength in her resilience, and Julian perhaps will learn from his father's mistakes. As for the others, they will carry the lessons of this tragedy, whether they wish to or not. The train pulled into a small station, the platform dimly lit by gas lamps. Poirot rose, adjusting his coat. Come, Hastings. We have a few minutes before we continue. A breath of fresh air will do us good. They stepped onto the platform, the cool evening air a stark contrast to the stuffy compartment. Poirot paced slowly, his eyes scanning the horizon. This case, Hastings, it reminds us that even in the grandest houses, the human heart is fragile.
Now our work is done. The unseen threads, the will, the secrets, they will be addressed by the solicitor and the police. We have done our part. At the little grey cells, they rest, for now. As they reboarded the train, Hastings felt a sense of resolution, though the echoes of Blackthorn Manor lingered in his mind. The case was closed, but its lessons of love, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of truth would stay with him, a testament to Poirot's genius and the complexities of the human soul. Chapter 14. The Final Pieces. The train from Exeter to London swayed gently through the night, its wheels humming a steady rhythm against the tracks. It was now 8:30 p.m., and the compartment where Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings sat was a cocoon of quiet, illuminated only by the soft glow of the overhead lamp. The events at Blackthorn Manor seemed to belong to another world, yet their weight lingered, casting a shadow over the journey. Hastings, his notebook tucked away, felt a restless curiosity, his mind still grappling with the intricacies of Clara Denham's crime and the unresolved questions surrounding Sir Reginald Ashbourne's will. Poirot, his posture as impeccable as ever, gazed out at the darkened landscape, his expression one of serene contemplation, though his eyes betrayed a mind still sifting through details. Hastings shifted in his seat, unable to resist breaking the silence. Poirot, I know you're satisfied that Clara was the murderer, and her confession ties up the main threads. But the will, the real one locked in Sir Reginald's desk, it's still nagging at me. What if it changes everything? Could it point to another motive or even another suspect? Poirot turned from the window, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. Mon ami, your persistence is commendable. The will, it is the final piece of this puzzle, a shadow that lingers even after the light of truth has been cast. You are right to question it, for it holds the key to understanding the full scope of Sir Reginald's intentions and perhaps the deeper currents of this tragedy. He leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. Let us reconstruct the events once more to ensure no thread escapes us. Clara Denham killed Sir Reginald to prevent the exposure of their affair and to secure her future through a forged draft of his will. The rose petal from her corsage marked her presence in the study. The clock, stopped at 1:47, was her attempt to confuse the timeline. The note, "The truth will out," was a psychological flourish reflecting her own guilt. The cufflink belonging to Monsieur Crane was a deliberate misdirection, and the letter signed "A Friend," written in her hand, was a trap to lure Sir Reginald to the study. All this we have established, but the will, the true will, remains a mystery, locked away, its contents known only to Sir Reginald.
But why didn't Clara take it? If she was so desperate to control the inheritance, why leave it locked in the desk? Poirot's eyes gleamed.
An excellent question, Hastings. I believe Clara did not take the will because she did not need to. Her forged draft was meant to be presented as the final version, to be accepted before the solicitor could reveal the true document. She knew the real will was locked away, and she banked on the chaos of Sir Reginald's death delaying its discovery. But there is another possibility. The true will may contain a provision so shocking that it drove her to act, not just to secure her own future, but to prevent another from benefiting.
Hastings leaned back, his pulse quickening. You mean someone else stood to gain or lose something significant? But who? Julian? Lady Evelyn? Or someone we haven't considered? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. That, mon ami, is why I have telegraphed Sir Reginald's solicitor, Mr. Harold Wentworth, to meet us in London tomorrow. The will must be examined, for it may reveal the final piece of this puzzle, a motive that Clara sought to bury with her crime. The train slowed as it approached a junction, the platform lights casting fleeting shadows across the compartment. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who seemed lost in thought, his fingers tracing the edge of his watch. And what about the others? Hastings asked. Lady Evelyn, Julian, Dr. Warwick, Mrs. Langley, Crane. They all had their own secrets. Could one of them have known about Clara's plan and stayed silent, or even encouraged it? Poirot's gaze returned to the window, his voice tinged with a quiet melancholy. In a house like Blackthorn Manor, Hastings, secrets are like the ivy on its walls, entwined, hidden, but ever present. Lady Evelyn's silence about her husband's infidelity protected her pride, but it also blinded her to Clara's desperation. Julian's resentment made him a suspect, but his anger was too raw, too unfocused to be the mind behind the murder. Dr. Warwick, with his medical detachment, may have suspected Sir Reginald's affair, but chose loyalty over candor. Mrs. Langley's nervous observations gave us the key to Clara's presence in the corridor, but her fear clouded her judgment. And Monsieur Crane, ambitious and calculating, was a convenient target for Clara's misdirection, but not a conspirator. Hastings nodded, though his unease persisted. So you're certain there was no accomplice? Clara acted entirely alone? Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. I am certain of what the evidence tells us, Hastings. Clara's confession, the rose petal, the handwriting, they all point to her guilt. But the human heart is complex, and it is possible that others knew more than they admitted. The will, I believe, will clarify this. If it names an unexpected beneficiary or excludes someone expected, it may
Sensed in the manner? The train resumed its journey, the countryside now shrouded in darkness. Poirot adjusted his coat, his movements precise as always.
Tomorrow, mon ami, we shall meet Mr. Wentworth and examine the will. It may confirm Clara's motive, or it may reveal a new layer to this tragedy. For now, let us rest. The little grey cells, they require repose to function at their best.
Hastings leaned back, his mind still buzzing with questions. You always make it sound so simple, Poirot. But this case, it's left a mark. The Ashbournes, the manor, the betrayal, it's all so human. Poirot's smile was warm, though tinged with sadness.
Oui, Hastings. It is the human element that makes our work both challenging and necessary. We uncover the truth not to judge, but to understand. And in understanding, we bring order to chaos.
As the train carried them closer to London, Hastings felt a sense of anticipation. The case was closed, but the final pieces, the true will, the unspoken motives, awaited them. Blackthorn Manor's secrets were not yet fully laid bare, and Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth would ensure that no thread remained unseen. Chapter 15. The Final Truth. The London morning was crisp and grey, the city stirring to life as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings arrived at the offices of Mr. Harold Wentworth, Sir Reginald Ashbourne's solicitor, at precisely 10 a.m. The events of Blackthorn Manor felt like a distant memory, yet the weight of the unresolved questions, particularly the contents of Sir Reginald's true will, lingered in Hastings' mind. Poirot, his suit immaculate and his moustache perfectly waxed, exuded a quiet confidence as they entered the solicitor's wood-panelled office, a stark contrast to the opulent chaos of the manor. Hastings, clutching his notebook, felt a surge of anticipation. This meeting promised to tie up the final threads of the case, revealing the full scope of Clara Denham's motives and the secrets that had driven her to murder. Mr. Wentworth, a thin man with a meticulous air that rivaled Poirot's own, greeted them with a nod, his desk cluttered with legal documents.
Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, he said, his voice formal but warm. I received your telegram and have prepared Sir Reginald's will as requested. I must say I was shocked to hear of his death and Miss Denham's arrest. A tragic business.
Poirot inclined his head, his eyes sharp.
Monsieur Wentworth, the tragedy of Blackthorn Manor is indeed profound, but it is the truth we seek today. The will, it may hold the final key to understanding why Clara
Off, and he handed the document to Poirot.
Poirot broke the seal with care, his gloved hands unfolding the paper with the precision of a surgeon. Hastings leaned forward, his heart pounding as Poirot's eyes scanned the text. The room was silent, save for the faint ticking of a clock on the mantelpiece. "Mon ami," Poirot said at last, his voice low but resonant. "The will, it is as I suspected, a revelation that changes the landscape of this crime. Listen carefully." He began to read, summarizing the key points. Sir Reginald bequeaths Blackthorn Manor and the bulk of his estate to his wife, Lady Evelyn, with provisions for her to maintain the property in perpetuity. To his son, Julian, he leaves a modest trust, conditional upon his demonstrating responsibility, a clause that no doubt fueled Julian's resentment. To Dr. Lionel Warwick, a small bequest in recognition of their friendship. To Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a stipend for her loyal companionship to Lady Evelyn. To Victor Crane, nothing. Sir Reginald explicitly notes his distrust of Crane's financial ventures. And to Clara Denham... Poirot paused, his eyes narrowing. To Clara Denham, he leaves a substantial sum, £50,000, on the condition that she resigns her position and leaves Blackthorn Manor within 6 months. Hastings gasped, his mind racing. £50,000? That's a fortune. But why the condition? And why didn't Clara take the will if it named her? Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of quiet triumph. Exactement, Hastings. The condition is the key. Sir Reginald, I believe, intended to end his affair with Clara. The bequest was a generous farewell, but also a dismissal. Clara, however, saw it as a betrayal, a sign that he would expose their relationship and cast her out. She forged a draft of the will to secure a larger share, and when Sir Reginald summoned her to the study, perhaps to discuss the bequest, she killed him to prevent the truth from emerging. Wentworth, his face pale, shook his head. I had no idea their relationship was improper. Sir Reginald was discreet, but he mentioned once that Clara had become too involved in his affairs. I thought he meant her work. Poirot nodded. He meant both, Monsieur Wentworth. Clara's efficiency made her indispensable, but her heart made her dangerous. The letter signed "A Friend" written in her hand was her attempt to unsettle Sir Reginald, to draw him to the study alone. The rose petal from her corsage
Gaze grew distant.
I believe Lady Evelyn suspected the affair, but not the bequest. Julian knew his inheritance was at risk, but not the specifics. Dr. Warwick, as Sir Reginald's friend, may have sensed a change in his demeanour, but he remained silent out of loyalty. Mrs. Langley's observation of Clara in the corridor was the key that unlocked the case, though she did not understand its significance. And Monsieur Crane, though implicated by the cufflink, was merely a pawn in Clara's game.
Wentworth cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. Mr. Poirot, there's one more thing. Sir Reginald had a codicil, added last week. It's in a separate envelope, to be opened only after the will's execution. He said it was a final gesture to ensure justice. Poirot's eyes lit up, and he took the second envelope, breaking its seal with care. The codicil was brief, but its words were explosive. Sir Reginald had established a charitable trust to be funded by half his estate for the education of underprivileged children in Devon. The trust was to be administered by an independent board with no family involvement. Hastings whistled softly. That would have infuriated Julian, and perhaps even Lady Evelyn. No wonder Clara was desperate to forge the will. Poirot nodded, folding the codicil carefully. This, mon ami, is the final truth. Sir Reginald sought to balance his legacy, wealth for his family, but also a gift to the world. Clara's actions were driven not just by love, but by fear that her future would be diminished by this trust. She killed to preserve her illusion of control. Wentworth shook his head, his expression sombre. I'll inform the family of the will's contents. It will be a difficult day for them. Poirot rose, adjusting his hat. It will, Monsieur Wentworth, but the truth, it is the foundation of healing. Thank you for your assistance. Our work here is complete. As they stepped into the bustling London street, Hastings glanced at Poirot. You did it again, Poirot. You saw what no one else could. But I can't help feeling sorry for Clara, driven to murder by a broken heart. Poirot's smile was tinged with sadness. The heart, Hastings, it is both our strength and our weakness. Clara chose her path, and now she must face its consequences. But we have brought order to chaos, and that is enough. They walked toward their lodgings, the city's hum a stark contrast to the silence of Blackthorn Manor. The case was closed, its secrets laid bare, and Poirot's little grey cells had triumphed once more, illuminating the final truth in a tale of love, betrayal, and murder.